I'm Austin Luga.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Monrovia, Indiana.
Before we get into this week's episode, next week we are going to be watching Blood In, Blood Out. I picked this movie because one of my students, who is incredibly unengaged in the work that we do in class, really loves this movie and has watched this movie literally dozens of times. He can quote it by heart. He watches it a lot in class, which is not my favorite thing in the world. But my thought process is if I watch the movie, then maybe I can somehow engage him some way in something because he's a good kid overall. It's just I cannot get him to read for the life of me. So maybe I don't know. Maybe this will do something. Maybe it won't. But it looks good. I mean, I don't know much about it, but seems like a good
No, it
time.
looks it looks it looks cool.
Yeah.
Bound by Honor, as I think, like Bound by Honor seems to be like the more official title.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks good.
Blood in, Blood Out maybe like is the Spanish translation. Like that's what it was
That's a
called in
good point.
Spanish, and then like they translated the black back in English. So yeah, Bound It by Honor is what is on like Letterboxd and Just Watch and everything. I only call it that because that's what he
Right.
always called it. So, and that's
Yeah.
what's called
Okay.
on if you watched on YouTube, which it is free on YouTube for all you listeners, because these movies we've been watching lately have been hard to find. Like Monrovia, Indiana, that was that was a tough one to find because it's
It's
not
on it's on
available.
it's on the Internet Archive though.
It's on the archive, but that's pretty much it. Like you cannot find it on any streaming service, not
Right.
even
And
like
the
on
okay.
Amazon.
And the reason for that is because Frederick Wiseman, I believe, has always been like funded through like public broadcasting sources and stuff like that.
Right.
And so his movies are always like not on like I guess you could like they always come through like some kind of like library source, you know what I mean? Which is why they're like
Yeah.
all on Canopy and nowhere else pretty much. Um because that's just how it an internet archive, I guess, is like a library. It's the internet's
Yeah.
library, so I guess it makes sense too. Obviously, I don't think he put them on there. I think someone else
Probably
did.
not. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that's why they're not really like on anything else.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time trying to find this film because I wanted to watch it on like my TV or whatever. And I even like you can't even buy like a DVD of this. Like PBS doesn't even sell like DVDs of it anymore.
Did you watch it on
You
the archive?
so the way I found it eventually was I stole my brother Brandon's Canopy account because he's a college student. So he didn't even know that he had it. Like he didn't even know he had access to it, which is a shame that something as incredible as Canopy and he didn't even use it. But I stole his account and it's not on Canopy, but you can request it from your local college for like a short amount of time. So I had to like fill out this form for the University of Nevada, Reno, asking them to let me borrow this specific film because I just said it was for like a film studies course. I had to like bullshit like this whole long thing. I had to look up like courses because it had to be like what course is it for and all this shit.
If you could have just watched it on the internet archive, it would have been
But
much
I didn't
easier.
I didn't want to. I wanted to watch it on Canopy. I was determined. I don't know why. But I did get it and I did watch it. And Emily watched it with me and she has opinions on the piece.
I think it's the funniest movie ever made. I love this movie, dude. I love the Wiseman style. I think he's the greatest documentary filmmaker that ever lived.
Honestly, he's easily up there. This is my first Wiseman experience, which is a great one to kind of get into the Wiseman world. And not only that, I feel like as two Hoosiers and watching with my wife, who's also a Hoosier, or I guess former Hoosiers.
You
I
know,
guess once a
I
Hoosier,
did
always
watch
a
it with my
Hoosier.
partner as well. I watched it with my partner as well, and they're also from Indiana, of course.
It made me really homesick. Like I don't often miss the
I
state
don't
of
know about
Indiana.
that.
Well, that's
Uh,
because you
uh,
basically live in Indiana. Louisville's not that different. It's the
I
same like
guess
climate.
I don't know. Like I have different opinions of that, but I will say our town wasn't our town has similar it has similarities to
Yeah,
the stuff that you see in this movie, but it is different.
for sure.
Um, this place is Monrovia is much more small.
Than where we
But
grew up.
there are places like this that we've driven through, we've been
Yeah,
around in, we've been into like obviously there are similarities to where we're from, of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I looked it up on a map to see like exactly where it was because I know
Yeah.
I've driven through there before. I've never like stopped in Monrovia because no one
It's
would
like southwest of
stop in
Indy, right?
Monrovia.
Yeah.
It's almost the exact distance Noblesville is from Indianapolis.
Right.
Just they're
Yeah, that's what it looked
southwest
like.
and we're like
Yeah.
almost exactly north. So it's kind of weird because like they have people that live there that probably like commute to Indianapolis every day, just like people in Noblesville commuted to
Definitely.
Indianapolis every day. So,
Definitely.
they kind of have that same environment. They're just a lot smaller. But I think when
They're
we
way
were like
smaller.
super young, Noblesville wasn't very big. Like when we were like, 5 or 6, like Noblesville was pretty small. I think it was just like as we grew up, it got a lot bigger.
I think so too. I think I think as we got incrementally every year as we got older, it became more and more large.
Yeah,
Like I said, there are differences and similarities to how we grew up, where we grew up compared to like Monrovia, Indiana. Monrovia, Indiana, yeah, like I we could talk about this movie for hours. Like
easily.
if we because there's so many things going on, you know what I mean? Like obviously we have like kind of like the personal connection from it because we're from the state and there are funny
Yeah.
little like things to discuss. The movie came out in 2018.
Mhm.
So what, this film was probably filmed 2016, 2017. So you're talking about like a post Trump America going on.
Yeah.
And, a person could, a documentary filmmaker filming in a place like this could probably, be a lot more, I guess, mean, I guess, about it.
Easily.
But Wiseman, he's pretty reserved. He doesn't really, but he's still saying something about that, I think. But he's not being, I don't know, he's not being intense about it. Which again, that's the Wiseman touch. Um, why do you think that he begins the movie the way that he does
With the pigs.
with the animals? Yeah,
Okay, so I have a theory about this whole thing because and I think the only way to talk about the beginning is also to talk about the ending because I think it's a
exactly. It's
perfectly
okay. So
bookended
this is
film.
the thing about the Wiseman that I was talking about Wiseman that I was talking about is that again, his footage is completely just the footage and the sound. Like that's
Yeah,
it. Like there are no labels, there is no music that he phones in, there is never any talking head interviews, there's never any explanations or narration. It's just the footage and the sound that he gets while he's on site at the wherever he is. And that's it. And really the only thing that he does, the only methods that he uses to tell the story, what he's trying to say in the story that he's trying to tell is through his editing and where he places the scenes in what order.
yeah, and I
And
feel
he
like
edits all himself.
he
He
does.
edits all of his movies.
He produces right when like it's like little thing because it's like producer, editor, director. There's like 6 things
Sound,
there.
yeah.
There's only like 10
Yeah.
people that work on the film, which is incredible.
Yeah. He's
But he's
been
not his own
working with
cinematographer. He
yeah.
does have another. I
Yeah,
don't know who
he's
does some more
that
work.
cinematographer guy, he's been working with
Mhm.
him for like decades, like three,
Oh
four
shit.
decades. So it's like
Okay.
I think what Wiseman does is that like he'll go on site with him with that guy. Like that guy is almost basically his co-director. They'll shoot
Yeah.
footage and then at the end of each day, they'll like go mull over the footage and talk about it.
Okay. Did you want to add your comments on
It was fun. Also, I recognized a few people I went to college with in it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. There you go, small world.
Who?
There's a girl at the baby shower. And there was
Oh,
another
Wow.
this is wild.
one. Yeah.
Real
That's
world.
I don't
that's
know what her
incredible.
name was, but I was like, I remember her. I mean, I went to a really small school. There's only like 700 people.
We're basically in the movie
And it's not
Monrovia,
far.
Indiana.
It makes sense. I mean, like it's not that far.
Anyway,
That
No.
city is not
it
that
was
far from
like
the college.
you know those TikTok videos where you can watch and you just like it was ASMR basically to me.
Did you hear Emily?
She said it was boring.
She said it was ASMR. It was basically
Oh,
just
okay.
2 hours of ASMR.
That's
It,
all it
it
was.
it's it is like kind of like a lulling experience, like the Wiseman documentary. So I kind
Yeah,
of see where she's coming from. Like the way that I don't know how he's able to do it. He's just able to like edit scenes
it's
in a way
extremely
where
hypnotic.
yeah, like and once you watch one scene, you're just kind of like, okay, I gotta watch the next scene to see what he does, what happens next.
Right?
Even if the next scene is just like nothing, right? Like nothing. Um, I just think that like yeah, he's just like really good at editing, and like we talked about, yeah, like the way that he puts it in order, and of course at the beginning he does the cows and the pigs, at the very beginning.
Yeah. So we got off on a bit of tangent, but I was gonna say
Yeah,
why
yeah, right.
why the beginning is the way and the way it sort of bookends with the ending of the film. And I think this is really kind of the crux of the film as a whole. And I think one way to talk about it is to look up like when you look up the description of this movie, which I'm gonna do right now because if it's sorry, I'm reading it to yeah, Monrovia, Indiana explores a small town in rural mid America and illustrates how values like community service, duty, spiritual life, generosity, and authenticity are formed, experienced, and lived along with conflicting stereotypes, which I think is a fine description, but I think it kind of fundamentally misses the point of this, as so many descriptions of movies often do, because how the hell do you describe something like this movie in a sentence or two? But I think at this core of this movie, it's and the reason that we start with the pigs and the cows is because this is about how everything that happens in this world, right? I think a great example of this is there's this long scene where like the Lions Club talks about a bench, like 15 minutes, where
This
all
is
they
a
talk
yeah.
about
This is a Wiseman. This is another Wiseman feature. He loves filming meetings like this, like board budget meetings. He'll every one of his movies will at least have a handful, and they will go on as long as they need to.
like Emily was this was Emily at her like angriest was this conversation with the bench. But
It
I think that
it's so audacious. Like it really is like very like audacious to like be like this is gonna
it
be
is.
15 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's and right, not any fancy camera movements here, any fancy
nothing.
camera work. It's just like a couple of singles, maybe the camera moving around a little bit, and they get really heated because they're talking about where they're going to put a bench and like all of the things that go along with
Yeah,
a bench. And I think what this film at its core is all about, which I think is a big way, really, not only Monrovia, Indiana is, but Indiana as a state is, and the way that we interact with the rest of the country in the world is we're kind of the force behind a lot of things that people don't think about on a daily basis. Like if you walked outside right now and you went to your local downtown, wherever that is, whether it's a big city, small city, whatever, every single thing in that town, like someone put a hell of a lot of thought, like from the bench to the lamppost to where the mailbox is. And that's like the core of this movie is the smallest things, right? From the food that we eat to the animals that we eat to right, all these little things, like in the funeral at the end,
yeah.
like yes, there's the parts that we all think about like the meat, right, when we go to the grocery store, or the like spiritual experience of the funeral, but all of that is surrounded by this sort of manual labor and the sort of like hidden people that make everything possible, right? I think it's
Right.
very important to recognize that first of all, the first thing that we see isn't the meat being made, right, or the pigs being slaughtered, but rather just like a guy moving pigs from one place to another or cows from one
Hmm.
place to another. And simultaneously at the end, instead of ending like so many documentaries would on the funeral itself, because that is a very
Yeah,
powerful moment. Like when he sings Amazing Grace, I mean, oh my God, like that is so
it's great.
intense and heartbreaking and heart-rending, especially after that like super long spiritual like Christian funeral, like he talks like he gives his whole speech, right, his whole
It's a
preach.
really long. He gives like a
It's
sermon
so
like to the
long.
funeral,
It's the
and
whole thing. It's the whole
and he
fucking
films the whole
sermon.
thing. Yeah. Again, like
And
with Wiseman working in digital, he doesn't care. He'll just let it go.
it just goes for fucking ever. But instead of ending on that, right? Instead of ending on that amazing final moment of Amazing Grace, what we end on is the people who are bearing the casket itself, right? Again,
Right.
going
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
this
The
idea,
work, the
right?
labor.
The labor, the
Again.
work, the people behind the work that we
Yeah.
do, and that's just kind of
Again,
like
that's a Wiseman. That's a Wiseman thing.
it's great.
Showing he was showing the like the work and the labor. He loves doing that as well.
And that's what this movie's all about. And that's what Monrovia, Indiana is all about. And that's what Indiana as
I
a state
suppose.
is
Yeah.
all about. Because
Yeah.
it's about like,
Yeah.
it's right. It's like the crossroads of America. It's the way in which like most of the things that people in this community do are never recognized by anyone except like the local community, even though in a lot of ways they kind of are the backbone. I mean, is, crummy or like I don't know, whatever word you want to use, it sounds. I mean, they really are like sort of the backbone of everything we do. Like, because I mean, you watch this whole long thing, like them, like, right, moving corn from like one place to another, which seems
Yep.
like really pointless, but like that's not only a huge
It's
part of
it's very satisfying to watch.
it's extremely satisfying to watch. Like,
Yeah.
it's such
Some
a
people might find it boring. Once again, like I can understand people finding a movie like this boring, but I find it a Wiseman dog always surprises me with how satisfying and entertaining it is,
it's
despite
amazing.
its presentation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's something brilliant, not only in the editing, but also the sound design, which I recognize that all of
Right.
the sound is shot on scene, but very crisp and very thoughtful. And it's
Yeah.
obvious that
Yeah.
because I'm guessing he only shoots with like one or two cameras. I don't think he shoots with a whole lot of cameras.
He must shoot with like two, at
I'm
least
guessing
two,
I'm
probably not
guessing at
one,
least
right? At
two,
this
but I'm
point.
guessing I'm guessing he doesn't shoot with very many because there's no when I went through the credits, there was no like camera op. So then it had to just be the cinematographer and him on set. Maybe there's like one other guy, but I mean I guess they could set up more cameras, like some stills, but most of that stuff is other than like the main thing, a lot of it's handheld. Like whenever they cut to like someone like sitting around or talking, usually that's like hand because you can see like little shake, which is great because if you did everything on sticks, this it might get a little
It's like you're there.
daunting. It is. It feels like you're really like it genuinely feels like someone's, which I guess is kind of what's happening, right? It's just like a guy sitting there with a camera, and it's amazing how few of the people or how willing people are to just like be themselves in front of a camera. And
Yeah.
I did not expect that. And I was my fear with documentaries always is something that I learned of in film school, which is sort of about film sort of ends, which of course like the Schrodinger effect, right? This idea that which comes from physics, the idea that if you put a cat in a box and you close the box and you don't know if the cat is dead or alive, but the moment you open the box, it will release a poison, the cat will die. So as long as the box is closed, like hypothetically, the cat is both dead and alive. It's both and neither simultaneously. But the moment you open it, you fundamentally change the existence of the cat, right? You kill the cat the moment you open it. And originally it's supposed to talk about this idea, Schrodinger's idea and hypothesis that the moment that you look at a single particle, like it fundamentally changes how that particle works. And so simultaneously in film, especially in documentaries, like the moment you put a camera in a room, like you fundamentally change the atmosphere of the room, right? The way people react to it. And I think this must be part of just like the mastery of Wiseman, just his ability to get
I
people
think Wiseman
really
would laugh at that.
comfortable.
I think Wiseman, because I've heard him like in interviews and stuff like that. People will ask him like, "Do people ever like react differently, or like how do you get people to like be themselves and stuff like that?" And he's just like, "I don't do anything differently. Like they do act like themselves. Like I think he just is. I think he. I don't think he does anything all that special, to be honest. I think he just really thinks that like I think people are like I think because everyone is different and thinks differently, I think people may act differently in front of the camera, but the way that they act still to us might seem real in a way where it seem even when they are even when they know they're in front of a camera and they're trying to like play themselves up or whatever like that, um that to me is still really real. At least to me, like as a viewer, in a movie like High School, like an early film of his, um, there's like at the high school in like the late 60s in like I think Massachusetts, there's like this terrible like staff member who all he does is discipline students. And he clearly is trying to play himself off as this like cool, like powerful man, at the school. So even though he's playing himself up because he feels like what he's doing is good and fine, obviously to the viewer, I find his actions to be, deplorable.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like I just think that like Wiseman, yeah, he's just able to he gets a lot of footage probably, and he probably takes out anything in which a person probably like looks right at the camera. Well, maybe not looks
There's
right
a
at the
couple of
camera, but
moments, but still, yeah.
yeah, like a glance at the camera is not that bad. But like,
No,
maybe points out the camera or points out them or,
for
talks to
sure.
them or something like that. I think he probably erases all of that footage and then he just keeps the stuff in which people just didn't do that. And I think that's pretty much what you're left with for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. And I think Weissman might not be fully aware of this, but I mean, he's been a documentarian for like what, 50, 60 years now? Like he's been a documentarian
He has a
forever.
new one out this year.
Yeah. So
He's
I
like
think
90
part of,
something.
yeah, I think part of it is that he has this certain presence about him and this way of speaking to people that just makes them really comfortable. Just not necessarily
I
like he's doing
guess.
it on purpose. But I mean,
Have
if
you?
you've been doing it for so long, like you just have this like natural sense of being able,
I,
and
I guess so. Yeah.
then also on top of that, he was there for like 8 months, right? Because at the
No, yeah,
beginning of the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
film,
He's there. No, exactly. Right, exactly. No, that's obviously another aspect to it. Whenever you hear him in like interviews and stuff like that, he's a very short guy, like short as in like his temperament.
uh-huh,
So I like to think that he is just like so short and so like maybe callous, unemotional that maybe that just as people are just like whatever, like
yeah,
I don't think he's like a very I don't think he's an incredibly nice guy, but that's okay.
mm,
But yeah, you're right about that too. He probably is there for like 1, 2, 3 months of just like filming every single day, going to different places, probably scheduling one thing after the other. Obviously, there's probably hours and hours of footage that he recorded that's not in the movie.
hundreds and hundreds of
Um,
hours, I imagine.
yeah, probably, yeah, and um, yeah. So obviously, that's an aspect too, where he's able to like ingratiate himself with the community and just kind of, people just kind of ignore him after a while.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, and also too, it's different to make a movie in like 2017, 2018 and have like a big camera around than I'm sure it was like in his early films. Like it's just people are a lot more comfortable in front of cameras too than they were, say, 30 or 40 years ago. So I think that's also
He still got great footage back then. He still got
oh, I'm sure.
amazing
I'm
footage.
sure.
He would still pop off with like the footage he would get. Um, Another really great movie, by the way, from that he released before Monrovia, Indiana, is In Jackson Heights, which is about the Jackson Heights neighborhood in Queens, New York City, which is said
Okay.
to be. They say it's like the most diverse neighborhood in the world. Um, so
Interesting.
that's a really good one where he just, goes around the neighborhood and people talk about like what's the word? Where people like come in and they destroy the diversity of neighborhoods, they put their
Oh,
businesses in there.
gentrification.
Yeah, they talk about gentrification a lot in that movie and but of course you get great scenes of like, these different cultures and parts of the neighborhood doing their thing. This movie is great to pair with that one, but just because like there's obviously, you could spend all day talking about the similarities and differences, right?
Yeah.
It's great.
I
But
I
I
love
think like, yeah, sorry,
yeah.
continue. No, continue.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I love this moment at the end. And there's a lot of like of all the scenes, the one that's repeated the most, or rather the one we kind of get the most of, that's kind of like the through line of the story, is like the planning committee, like the people who like design the city, I
Yeah, I
think
think it's the
is like
planning
what they
committee.
do.
Yeah, yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that.
Which is very important. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very right. It's again, it's one of those things that you don't think about, right? No one really thinks about the way your city is planned, unless like there's something fundamentally wrong with the way your city is built. Like most of the
Yeah.
time when you walk through a city, you don't think about how every like the fire hydrants, right? There's this whole long conversation about fire hydrants and the difference between a fire hydrant and a flushing hydrant, which I guess is
Yeah, flushing
a different
hydrant. Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like a there's like a neighborhood in Monrovia and like yeah, the planning committee, there's this push and pull between like with the planning committee, the big push and pull is like this push and pull between like developing the city and not developing the city, right? Like, because it's like, well, we more money, more people is good, right, for the tax base. But then they're like, yeah, but we really like, I just want to like not have a lot of people around either, like. So there's this push and pull between
It's
like people on the planning commission and stuff, and yeah, that awesome guy comes in. He's like upset because he's just like he lives like in this like I think newish neighborhood, and he's just like, I
Homestead.
thought it was a
Yeah.
fire hydrant right there, and it turns out it's not. Like,
He's so
and I'm like
angry.
really upset about it. Yeah, like I'm kind of like upset if like it's gonna suck if there's a fire and like we're all the way out
All they
here
have
and
is like a tank. Yeah.
yeah, like the tank truck to go like take care of
Which
the
is wild.
fire. Yeah, it's just like yeah, like sometimes like stuff like that like slips through the cracks, right? And yeah, but the planning commission meetings, I mean that's classic Wiseman. That's just classic like just classic meeting budget commission planning stuff that is so much fun to watch.
It's so great,
Um
especially like that first conversation where that one guy who's gonna like it looks like he's like from like the county or even like the state, and like it's his job to
Yeah. Develop.
like
He
develop.
his job is to develop the county, but then everybody
Right.
kind of like some people
They're so
like push
pissed.
back on him like I don't I don't really.
Which, speaking as someone who works in a small town community, and particularly in a government position in a small town school, locals, whether they be in like the high school itself, like people who work in the high school, or the community, always hate the county and the state. Like it's just like there's something about that power dynamic that they just
Yeah.
like every like district came to our school this last week to like watch us and provide comments, and people were fucking pissed. Like they were so angry, and I
You
think
mean
it's
about
just
the
like,
fact that people came to like judge them?
yeah, the fact that
Yeah.
district came to like critique the stuff that we are doing, and it
But I
upset
thought that's
everyone.
kind of
Like the
weird to
point.
be upset about, but I guess
But
yeah.
I mean, it's something I saw at Noblesville, like when I worked at high school there. It's something I
Mhm.
saw like at the IPS. There's just something about that power dynamic that, I don't know, it's like this sense of like freedom and not having to like bow down to someone else. It's like a very American thing. Like obviously
Yeah,
it's
it
not
is, yeah.
just a Midwest thing, because I see it out here in Dayton too. It's I guess maybe more perhaps a small town thing, and it's just like not wanting to be told what to do by someone
Yeah, I
higher
agree,
up.
yeah.
Like you don't, like the idea is like you don't know our community, right? You don't know it the way we do. You don't know how we work the way we do. And I love that opening scene because that guy comes in and he talks about Fishers, right? Which we live,
Yeah,
or
it's
we
funny. Yeah,
lived very close
that's
to
funny
Fishers,
that he
right?
mentions Fishers. Yeah, which is
Which,
a
by the
very,
way,
very like it's like extremely developed like town. Like it's like crazy.
very
They have like a
developed.
park in every neighborhood, and they have like these crazy like it's just like a crazy downtown area.
Tons of like
Yeah, it's just
malls
like
and all
it's
kinds of stuff.
crazy
Yeah.
city.
And we got to kind of watch that like happen. Like, remember when we
Yeah, it
were
basically
like
did
little, there
happen.
was
Yeah,
like nothing there. It was just like farms.
yeah, it's
And now
true.
if you go to Fishers, it's extremely developed,
It's
full of
super
like
busy. Yeah,
suburbs and all kinds of stuff. And he talks about like the growth because it like became like 4 or 5 times the size. And I think at this point it's like 8 or 9 or 10 times the size that it was when he first worked there. And he talks
yeah.
about how like, oh yeah, there's all these things that we did to grow it. And then everyone just gets furious, like the
They're
idea.
completely like they yeah, because it's like yeah, it's like they don't want to see like the identity of like the town like disappear, right? And I can understand and obvious, but there's also probably like a xenophobia thing going on too, where it's
For
like I would
sure.
prefer not to have any people immigrate to my city. Um, yeah,
It's and you know what? What's funny is that is something that's a really big issue here in Reno right now. And if you talk to local officials, if you talk to the local Reno community, which isn't a small town, of course it's Alfie. Of course it's famously the biggest little city. So
right.
when Emily was little, like the city had about like 100,000 people. So not a small city by any means, but certainly not at the level of an Indianapolis or Chicago or any of these things, right? It's a tenth of the size. And now Reno is about 500,000 people. So it's grown quite a bit. And it's grown quite a bit, particularly in the last 10 years. And this is mostly due to the fact that people from California are moving to Reno because it's a lot cheaper, because there's no state
Mhm.
tax, housing's a lot cheaper, of course, also there's a lot less forest fires and earthquakes and those kind of things. So it's also just safer from like an environmental perspective.
Yeah.
But what this has done is a house like the one Emily and I live in has gone from being $200,000 10 years ago to being almost $600,000.
Yeah.
Right, because the thing about Reno, which is different than like the Midwest, is like if more people move to a city like Monrovia, Indiana, they just build more houses because they can, right? There's just all of that land.
There's a lot of land. Yeah.
But here there's nowhere to build because it's a fucking mountain. Like we're in a valley. Like
Yeah.
there's no places to put more
You run
houses.
out of
So then
space. Yeah.
exactly. So instead of just like building more houses, and the house, of course, every house still slightly increases, but a lot less here, like because the demands continues to rise, but like the supply is very low because you can't really build new houses here because there's nowhere to build them because
Mhm.
everything's already developed because it
Mhm.
was developed like 50 years ago, and we're in a valley, so you can't like really build on a mountain, and then there's a national forest next to us, so you can't build in the national forest either. So the price of houses have like skyrocketed, and people are like super angry about it because they can't
Yeah.
like, and I understand the anger and the frustration because like they've changed the way the city works. But on the bright side, like if you drive down a place like Midtown, which a decade ago was just a bunch of sex shops and strip clubs, it's now like coffee shops and record stores and bookshops. So it's like, yeah, like
Yeah. It's
there are
once
some
again,
like
it's like,
downside, but it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It again, Wiseman, he does this perfectly in every movie that I watch. He does this perfect, like, American story thing where he demonstrates the push and pull of these different aspects, right? In the New York Public Library one, that one is about like the push and pull of private like industries and enterprises like for giving money to the library. And so like that aspect of it, kind of like the elitist aspect of it, and the important public utility that libraries serve in the New York City area. There's this like push and pull between the two, and here you have the push and pull as well. At least in a microcosm, the Monrovia,
yeah,
Indiana, it's about a lot of different things, but that's like a thing that is definitely demonstrated very well. Kind of like that push and pull between like development and industry, but also concern for, I don't know, once again, a change or the loss of identity or something like
yeah.
that. And um, so yeah, and I think once again, he does this not through narration, not through
Nope.
an explanation, not through a talking head interview of a guy talking about this or that, or when you watch those planning commissions, you have no idea who anyone is. Like you don't,
No.
you're never shown any names. You're never shown who is who, like who's in charge. Like they don't do any of those things to show to you, but you get the idea. Like you don't need to know everybody's name.
No, it's completely pointless. And Wiseman like recognized that at a fundamental level that like all these talking head interviews, all of these like here's this location, like it doesn't fucking matter. Like it doesn't matter where we
We
are.
get
Like
it.
he'll get the outside, right? He likes this thing where he'll shoot the outside of a building, he'll
Right.
go into the building, and then to end the scene, he'll cut back to the outside. Like that's all you need. Like, okay, this is a
Yeah.
church, or this is the bar or whatever.
I like that too. And you were talking about the beginning of the movie with the animals, and I think like I see where you're coming from with like work. Obviously, that's a big part of Wiseman's movies. I think also like there's a life and death thing going on. You live,
Yeah.
you die, you contribute whatever you can, and then you die. But I think it also serves as kind of like a narrative element where you have the city of Monrovia and what's outside of Monrovia, like all the farms. So it's as if you're like stopping at the farms. You know what I mean? As if like you
Sure.
were coming in, and then and then right after that you go right into the city.
The city.
And the other thing too, of course, about Monrovia, Indiana, that's extremely important is that literally right after I think those farming scenes, when you go into the city, you're right inside a church with like a church meeting, which the religion aspect of this movie is very, very apparent. And I believe Wiseman, I've heard him say in an interview that, you know, through his work and all of his movies and stuff, it's become very apparent to him how religious America really, really is. And
Yeah.
Monrovia, Indiana is one that definitely demonstrates that fact. Where yeah, you have like the you have the farm animals, and right away, boom, you're right in the church. And I think he's talking about like the pastor there. What is he talking about? It's very important. He's talking about like I think he's talking about like he uses he uses a certain word a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think what that word is. It has something to do with like I'm trying to think.
No, no, I'm thinking about it. I watched the first 30 minutes of this movie like 2 weeks ago, and then I watched the rest last night. So so it's been a while since I saw this
Oh,
part.
he's talking about tribulations. He's talking about
Yes.
tribulations, right? He's talking about
Tribulation.
like how life is hard and like, but when you die, like God will reward you, which
Reward you.
kind of goes back to the end of the movie, right? When the pastor is going off about like, yes, like your mom, your wife, whatever, she is dead, but it's a celebration because her pain, all of the pain and suffering that she had ever had is now gone forever. And she will live in paradise with God and whatever. Um, and again, this movie has like religious stuff going throughout the movie, and it's very important because it's very important to the community. And yeah, it's not far off at all.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it brings us really back to the core of the foundation of America and the United States. And not only this myth that we tell ourselves, right? This idea that the pilgrims came for religious freedom, and this idea that they were be able to practice whatever they want. But of course, that's a myth, right? The truth is that they came to practice a very specific type of religion, particularly Protestantism. Anyone who didn't practice Protestantism was either considered a witch or basically kicked out and sent off to the natives or whatever, and often either killed or slaughtered or starved to death or what have you. And the Protestants' idea of the world, which is very much what you see here in Monrovia, Indiana, is that God in life reward you for hard work. So the harder you
Yeah,
work, the more God will reward you.
the
And because
Protestant
of that,
thing. Yeah,
because of that, because of how hard you work, you will be rewarded by that amount in heaven. And that's exactly what you see here, right? The idea of the tribulations, like all this pain and suffering you go through, is so you will be rewarded in heaven. And that's kind of like you see how a lot of people live their lives in this small town, which is kind of like you kind of have to have that, right? Because like a lot of it is like
yeah,
grueling, very like challenging, hard work. And if you
farming
don't have
work. Yeah,
like very like labor intensive and work that could really just like wear you and burn you out. And if you don't have that idea, you don't have that something that hope, right? At the end of the tunnel, I mean, what's the point?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which of your favorite small businesses was your favorite in Monrovia, Indiana, that was filmed?
There's so many.
I like the pizzeria.
I, I was gonna say the pizzeria too. The
That's such
pizzeria
a
is great.
classic. That's such a
It's
classic
classic.
ass like pizzeria.
It's like exactly what you'd see in
Yeah, like
small
I've
town
seen like
Indiana.
places. Yeah, we've seen so many. I've seen probably so many different places like that in Indiana. Like it's so classic.
I love the pizza. I love the grocery store. Like it's
The
not
grocery store is
one of the big ones.
amazing.
It's great,
It's like
like local
connected to the
grocery
gas
store.
station. It's a gas station
It's
like
a gas
grocery
station
store.
grocery store. And like when they play that music, like that grocery store, like you can hear like the voice and stuff. That just like brings back like so many like I feel like I'm 6 years old again, like walking through Kroger or Meyer or whatever. it's it's
Did
great.
you like when they cut off the dog's tail? What?
No.
Okay. What's the medical reason for doing that? I'm sure there's a medical reason why, but I don't know what it is.
So that dog's a pit bull, right? So
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, they always like if you ever see a pit bull, like they never have a full tail, even though they're born with a full tail.
So it's like like an aesthetic reason or
I
something?
think it's an aesthetic thing.
Whoa. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah. I don't think there's like
Jesus.
any health concerns or anything with the tail. I think it's mostly just
They
like,
cut the
which I
fuck
think is
off of
kind of,
that tail. You see
yeah.
the whole once again,
You see the whole
like
fucking thing.
you see
It's
him like
gross.
it's like a vet and like they're cutting off the dog tail and they do it every and they you see the whole thing
So
and they
gross.
slice into it and it's just like that was very shocking. I'm trying to think if there's anything equally bloody or gory as that in other Wiseman movies that I've seen. I don't think so, honestly. Once again,
So
it's like a
gross.
life and death kind of I don't know, like this movie is like relatively violent compared to maybe like other Wiseman Films that I've seen. I mean, Titty Cut Follies is pretty violent, but that's
Sure.
kind of baked into
In a
the
different way.
subject matter. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that one is like very shocking and very fucked up. And I think there are others that are probably pretty violent too. Like there are ones I think deal more with like police and like there's literally one called domestic violence. So stuff like that
Yikes.
is probably very shocking and violent. But yeah, like this is like the image of the dog's tail being cut off is very like startling.
And I think the scene right after that is the scene at that other local restaurant, which by the way, almost none of those people were wearing gloves, which is very concerning to me.
Oh, are you talking about like the bar restaurant?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Where they're
place that
making like
once again,
salad, which is
that's
mostly
such
just
a
like
ram
lettuce and cheese.
they have so much cheese. That's such a Midwest thing.
It's
Like all
such
the
a
cheese on the
Midwest thing. Like I
salad.
see those
That
guys,
is a
those like
that's a
salads, which is
perfect
mostly just
salad.
like
Yeah.
chopped salad and
Perfect Midwest salad. Yeah, no, I mean that is just like a classic like ramshackle bar restaurant like in the downtown area.
sure is.
It's such a classic thing, you know. I love yeah, that's a good one too to point out. And you know, you see people like work on cars. You get a barber and a hairdresser, a
Yeah.
tattoo artist. Like you gotta get a whole gamut of like the small businesses in the area.
You got that local festival, which is basically like
Right. Another
every town
very
in Indiana,
every town in America has like a thing like this. Like
like a
just
local
everywhere you
festival
go,
with
a
the fried
festival that they do once a
food,
year.
and they got the crafts, and they
Exactly.
got
The live music, car shows for some
car
reason. Yeah, like
shows.
these small towns are like populated by tons of old people and they love cars. You know, they
They
love like
do.
old
They love them
cars and
so much.
they love going to car shows. So like that was obviously like not a surprise. I love the gun shop. The gun shop was a great moment.
That's an intense
I
moment.
love
You,
that
I mean,
one.
remember that moment, which I think is like early on in the gun shop scene. That guy's holding like a AK-47, like a rifle that's definitely used to like murder like a
Yeah, it's
lot of
like
fucking people.
yeah.
It's like
It's like
a
an M16. Yeah.
semi-automatic. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. Because like
Yeah,
most of
and
the
it's
stuff like in
yeah,
the gun shop, it is like
hunting
it's
shit.
like hunting shit. Yeah, it's like rifles and all that kind of stuff. But like it's kind of terrifying when you see him holding that like M16 or like when he's looking through that scope and it's like you have a really practiced eye. Like, or like when they're
Again, yeah.
the whole thing of like buying that handgun, which
The
is
huge handgun,
terrifying.
the crazy giant handgun is
That giant.
amazing. There's something kind of funny about it. This movie's so fucking funny. Oh god, I was cackling.
That film is so wild. And
Once
there's no
again,
like,
yeah.
yeah, there's no like background checks or any shit going
No.
on. Like it's just like, yeah, come and buy a gun. And it's just like you just walk into the store and you're just like, okay, here's a weapon that can murder hundreds of people.
But yeah, but the way they were talking about it, it's not like Wiseman is like saying, "Oh, look how stupid and
No.
like fucked up the shit is." Like again, he's kind of trying to say something about America and maybe post-Trump America, I think too. But he's not doing anything like egregiously like he's not, you know, he's not getting anything particularly political, you know. His movies aren't like super political. There's not like a lot of like
No.
politics going on, a lot of like right or left discussion going on in his movies. You know, it's just he goes to the gun shop, he films people talking and hanging out and doing their thing, and then he puts it together, and that's it. You know, like that's really all you need to see.
Yeah, there's this really funny moment. So like we've seen the planning committee throughout the whole movie. So you have all the people, like those are people that like what they look like their faces and stuff. And when they're at the festival,
They're basically our only like they're basically the only like characters of the movie essentially that you
yeah.
see throughout.
And at the festival, he like has a shot of like the Republican Party like
Oh
booth, and
yeah,
it's all of
yeah,
them.
right.
It's like all of them.
Right,
Or like
yeah. I
all
mean,
like
that's pretty
the
obvious. Yeah,
Republican,
I mean,
which is like, of course they are.
I could have called that.
I,
Yeah, like yeah,
I too lived in the Midwest. Like, yeah, the Republican Party is
yeah.
pretty much the
Yeah,
only party there.
pretty much every county within the that surrounds Indianapolis are essentially like yeah, Republican
Everything
voting.
except Indianapolis is basically red,
Yeah,
right? It's like there's like one blue dot, which is Indianapolis, and
and
then the
then
rest of the
boom,
state is just red.
and then maybe Bloomington is
I guess
probably a little bit
Bloomington's
blue.
blue, and maybe like up near
Obvi
Chicago.
Yeah, and yeah, north west, probably a little bit that like that too. But yeah, pretty much everything is very red. So yeah, that didn't surprise me at all. Uh yeah, you got this the fucking festival and stuff and Another cast of characters that you see sometimes are the guys talking at the cafe. You see those guys a couple
Those guys are
times.
great. Those old
Yeah,
guys, like I'd hang out with them.
classic.
I would go to that
I would
diner
not hang
and
out
just
with
hang
them
out.
because you know what
Are
the
you
two things that they
serious?
talk about are. You know what the two things that they talk about the entire time you see them in the movie? Their health problems and who died. Like
That's
who
what old
died
people do.
recently.
That's like how you get
I
the
why
hot
would I want to
goss.
be around that?
I think it's incredibly entertaining. I love that kind of
I'm
shit. Like
okay. I'm okay with being there with them in this context, but I don't want to like be in there with them. I'm good.
oh, they're the best. And that's I mean, that's like the core of everything old people talk about. Like you ever spend any time with an old person.
Yeah.
Like the only thing they're ever gonna fucking talk
Health
about is like
problems.
health
Yeah.
problems or like this person that they saw that they haven't seen in like a super long time and like the
Oh, they
long like
died.
family
Oh,
tree thing, especially that's like small town thing too, right? Like
right.
if you go to like any local shop and they'll be like, oh yeah, he's related to this guy who's related to this guy who's related to that
Yeah.
guy who's married to this person. Like that's the whole thing, and that's what they talk about. It's great. I love it. I love those old people and
No,
that
I love it
whatever
too.
diner
Yeah.
they're in.
Yeah. I definitely yeah, I love the scenes too. I think the scenes are amazing. I just don't want to be there in person with them. By the way, I liked all the high school stuff as well. The high
High
school
school
stuff
stuff
was
is good.
great. I
I'm
love like when
jealous.
I love when everyone was there, like watching, like listening to the band performance. That's very, very, of it, very, classic, shot, classic footage right there. Amazing. Everybody
Is
being
that what
forced
we
to sit.
sounded like when we were in band? I hope
It's
not.
almost, I don't know. They were pretty small. Um,
I hope we sounded better. But I don't know. Maybe
There's that
we
great
sounded
scene
like that
too.
too.
There's another thing that reminds me too, where like they're doing the mattress sale. I remember like towards the end of
Mattress
like high
sale.
school. I remember towards the high
We
school
did a
they were
mattress
doing that with the
sale.
band program. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the
To raise
weirdest
money.
thing to do.
I mean you need money, I guess. Like it's just
You
I
need
guess it
money. I mean,
works.
the fundraiser part isn't weird. It's just like
There's something
mattresses is really weird.
there's something kind of like that feels kind of wrong about it, almost as if it's a scam of some sort. But I don't know. Maybe it's not. I don't want to say that like I
There is
know. Like
something
I
a
don't really
little
know.
grimy about that.
But I guess
But
like you got to do what you got to do.
I am a bit jealous of their high school though, because it's even though that town is smaller than the town I work in, their high schools are
Yeah.
not a lot nicer than my high school. Like my high school is not
it looks a little
nice.
new. Yeah. It looks a
It's
little new.
either like it's been renovated or just like it's. I mean, high schools in Indiana are like such a big deal, even in like small communities, just because like high school
Yeah.
sports are so big,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Because they literally
that
talk
fucking
about it in the
gym,
movie.
that
They
is a great
literally talk
moment.
about it
Like
when the guy's talking about basketball.
the teacher, he goes on like
Yeah.
a 15-minute rant talking about, and like
I don't
I love
remember.
the
I don't
shots of the
remember.
kids. The
They don't
shots of
care.
the kids is like so fucking bored. Like they could not care less. And it
I barely care. Well, you know what I mean? Like it's like I just like the audaciousness. It's just funny to watch. Yeah, like the teacher like spend this much time talking about like the history of the
basketball
high school
team.
basketball team in Monrovia, like, and he's like making all these like different connections and stuff to like people who are like really like amazing, well
Yeah.
known like players and coaches and stuff like that. It's very funny.
I feel so bad for this teacher. I mean, as
He's
a
so
teacher
excited.
too, like we try so hard as teachers to engage our students, and we work so fucking hard to like get them engaged.
I
And
didn't see any phones though. Everybody was
no
just sitting still
phones,
and watching
you
and
know.
listening. They
I
didn't. They
mean,
were just they were listening. I wouldn't say there was a smile
they
on
were.
anyone's faces, but they were. I think they were listening. I don't know. Maybe you.
I mean,
I don't know. I look at it a little bit differently.
well, I think they were there and they were present. I wouldn't say they were engaged.
Okay, yeah, because yeah, it's maybe not something they're passionate about. The history of the high school basketball team in their little
It's
town.
very specific. Although, do you remember
Yeah.
when we were in fourth grade? I think it was fourth grade. Part of our history curriculum, and this was a statewide curriculum, was in fourth grade you had to spend like a whole semester on the history of Indiana,
Oh yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
and we had like a whole unit that was just basketball. Do you remember that?
I don't remember anything about the
We
basketball
talked.
unit.
You don't remember like learning about like the history of basketball and like how it was
No.
invented like near Indiana. We had a whole long thing It was like a
I don't
whole
really remember
unit.
that. I just remember like more about like learning about like the Ku Klux Klan and stuff like that.
I remember that too.
I don't really remember too much about. I don't remember like ever learning that much about basketball history in school and elementary school. I don't know.
Yeah, we had a whole unit on it. It was like a whole thing. We talked about like
I
where
know it's like
basketball
really
came
important. It's
from and like
obviously important to the history of like the state and stuff like that.
it's extremely important.
Obviously. Um, but yeah, I like all this stuff with the schools.
The school stuff's great.
Other thing that'll another Wiseman thing that'll do another classic Wiseman thing. He loves like filming performances of like dancing and music and stuff like that, which you do get in
Yeah.
this movie.
What's your favorite performance?
Well, I like the band performance, of course, at the very beginning. I do like the performance, like that little like the old guys playing music, and then it like cuts to the audience, and it's like 3 or 4
It's like
people.
3 people. They're
Classic.
pretty good. Like they're like a pretty
They
good
sound
folk,
good.
like
Yeah, I
old
mean, like
person
yeah,
folk
they're
band. Like they're good.
yeah,
And there's no one
yeah,
there. Like no one gives a shit.
right. Well, it looks like early in the day, so I guess maybe
Yeah.
that's why. But
Hopefully. Sure.
yeah, but um, I don't know. We could like go through every single scene in the movie and find something to talk about, like some kind of kernel of every scene, just kind of like I don't know. It's I don't know. Once again, like the Wiseman style, the Wiseman project, it just says so much, but it does so little.
Yeah.
It says more than like any documentary film that could be made.
And the thing about his work, which I feel like I want to be cautious about, is like part of me is like, oh, we can like read all this stuff into it. And, we time out like all these like, imagery and ideas and
Right.
like metaphors and all this shit.
Hmm.
But then simultaneously, like, part of me is like, well, what if he just like shot this stuff and he's like, oh, this will like go like maybe there's not like as much behind it as like people think there is, and it's kind of just like its thing. And I wonder how much of each is. I mean, I think there is a lot like behind it,
Well,
but then also like I'm afraid sometimes I'm looking too much into something that might not actually be there.
is that the point of it though? Like
I
you're
think so.
supposed to like try to like find some kind of like meaning in it. Like, what's the point of like I guess like what's the point of the movie podcast if there's no meaning to it, then like like what's the
Why
point
are
of
we
like
here?
talking about yeah, why are we talking about the movie then? uh, that's the thing about the Wiseman documentary is that like it's not like a Michael Moore documentary. Obviously, Michael Moore, very influential guy in my life.
No.
I don't really watch his movies much anymore, but Michael Moore documentary, even though it is well made, he wags his finger, right? Like
Oh yeah.
he'll point at the camera and he'll wag his finger and say like this is not good. Wiseman documentary doesn't do that at all. So I think when a person watches it for the first time, they're just like, man, I don't know how to feel or think, you know? That's
Yeah.
that's like where the real work comes in.
Man, should we wrap up this
Yeah, I think
conversation?
so too. We're coming up
Okay.
at an hour.
Okay.
Go
Uh
ahead.
okay. So I've never been a huge documentary person. Emily loves a good documentaries, particularly like the shitty crime documentaries that you see on Netflix and Hulu and all of that shit. And that's never really been something I've had any interest in. I don't know why anyone wants to watch like true crime stuff. I don't get the appeal of that, and I've never really gotten the appeal of documentaries in general. It's just a world that's just never interested me. Of course, there's a couple that I love. Hope Dreams, of course, one of the greatest documentaries of all time, and I'll continue to stand by that till the day I die. But there's something about this that's just perfect in every way. It may be one of my favorite documentaries that I've ever seen in my entire life. And again, there's not a whole lot, but it may even be one of my favorite films of all time. Like it's just so perfect in every single way. Everything about it is so thoughtful and hypnotic, and it lulls you into this space. And what's so baffling, which it can only come from a director who's just really fucking good at what he does, is like I could not leave the room without having to pause it, even though like hypothetically nothing's going on. Like it's just like a bunch of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
shots of stuff. It's so hypnotic
Food
and it had
food
me
being fried.
yeah. Like I was so engaged in it, which you wouldn't think, and I think this is the problem with so many documentaries is they fail to engage you. But this film is so engaging that I could not leave the room without like having to pause it. And I think that's the mark of a master filmmaker, particularly when it's like subjects that are not as concrete as say like a murder or even like Hoop Dreams, right? There's a very specific thing that it's trying to do, right? It's following these kids. They try to get to this very specific goal. And as long as you have a very specific goal, I think it's very simple and very easy to kind of do that. But with a film like Monrovia, like there's no like through line, right? There's no like log line. They'd be like, oh, this is like about this. And yet it works on every single level. I mean, the sound design, the visuals, editing, of course, which of course is like where a film such as this is really made. Most documentaries are made in the edit, but particularly one like this, where there's probably hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. I don't know, man. I think I'm gonna go with a 10 out of 10.
Wow. Cat. Bad.
He's just being an asshole.
Yeah, for me, like I love Wiseman, but honestly, there are maybe a couple that I think are a little bit better than this one, which has, I mean, that just goes to show you like how credible he is. At just like kind of like doing this thing. I don't know. For me, this is like a very high 8 out of 10, like bordering on a 9 for me. But again, it just goes to. But again, you took the words right out of my mouth. In with Wiseman being able to kind of like explain very little about the world, you learn more about it in the process. And you can attempt to find some kind of like great meaning or about like America, about people, about like spiritual life, like all these things like come into play very easily and snugly. And Wiseman, just like as an editor and as kind of like in the way that he orders his scenes, it makes his movies really enjoyable to watch, even when he's getting up there in like 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4 hour long movies. He actually has one about Belfast, Maine, which is over 4 hours long.
Wow.
I don't know like what, but I can't wait to watch it because I haven't seen it yet. But I would love to watch that one because I mean, I would love to visit Belfast, Maine and see what's up. You know what I mean? It's almost as if you visited the city, of Monrovia. It was like you're there.
Yeah.
And but you didn't. You could just like turn on the movie and you could watch it. So yeah, once again, 8 out of 10 movie. But it's, I don't know. I'm bordering on a 9. Um, just because I don't know. There's some others that come to my mind that I think I like a little bit more. And maybe part of me also maybe even wishes it was a little longer. I could have gone another hour, but maybe there's not as much going on there as maybe Boston or the New York Public Library and stuff like that. But still, amazing movie and really the greatest documentary filmmaker, top 3 probably. Just amazing and just yeah, so good.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo 12.
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RTR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much.